In an active shooter event, we talk about working in the warm zone, things like Casualty Collection Point or Ambulance Exchange Point. What does that mean, though? Why do we need them, and how are we supposed to be using them? That's today's topic. Welcome to the Active Shooter Incident Management Podcast. My name is Bill Godfrey, your podcast host. I am joined by three of my other fellow instructors at the National Center of Integrated Emergency Response. Sitting across from me is Leanna Mims from the Fire EMS side. Leanna, good to have you back in.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And Brian Biesner, also from the Fire and EMS side. Brian, good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And to my side is my favorite sheriff, Kevin Berry. Kevin, good to have you in.
Good to be here always.
All right. So today's topic, we're going to talk about kind of warm zone work and Casualty Collection Point, Ambulance Exchange Point, what they are, why we need them, why they matter. But let's start by just talking about what is a Casualty Collection Point.
I'll just go. It's a secure location where we can gather patients that need to be transported, need to be treated or transported. I think that's the simplest form to put it.
And the Casualty Collection Point is typically established by the first
contact teams.
The contact teams,
yes.
By law enforcement.
Yes.
And this is one that often people are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
They think that that's a job of the Rescue Task Force, which if the Rescue Task Force gets downrange and there isn't a Casualty Collection Point, sure. But what we're actually looking for is those first couple of contact teams on the law enforcement side who are getting control of the security situation to get those patients drug into an area that they can secure and hold ground so that we can then insert the Rescue Task Forces to provide the medical care.
Absolutely. And, one of the scenarios I always liked was the courthouse one. And so those initial contact teams go in and they're telling, we've got shots fired in the back of the courthouse, but in building 5, I've got 5 people down. And that's some very valuable information, not only for, the fifth man who's in charge tactically, but it's very important information because now we're starting to find out, your rescue task force, your medical branch people have already got that number 5, and they're starting to put the ambulances and what have you into play.
Yeah. So the other piece of this is the Ambulance Exchange Point. What is that? What's our definition of an ambulance exchange point, and how does it differ than the loading zone that is referenced as part of MCI triage text in every EMT and paramedic book when they tell you to set up triage, treatment, and transport? What is an ambulance exchange point, and how does it differ from a regular loading zone?
Well, an ambulance exchange point is where we are going to take everyone that we have treated, that we've triaged and we've treated, and we're going to put them in an ambulance to be taken to the hospital. It's not a place where we take the ones that we've triaged and treated to do it all over again, which when we talk about a normal MCI, that's essentially what happens. We go in and we do it all over again. In the case of an ambulance exchange point, we are still fighting the clock. And we are still fighting the clock. And we've
potentially security.
Yes.
That's what I was going to mention.
Yes. Security, yes. And making sure that the triage that we've done goes in the correct order. If we know that we have 5 reds and 5 yellows, we're not loading yellows before reds. We're discerning which hospitals that we're going to. That's all part of everything that's fed in through the AEP. But it's fast. It's a load and go. The work's already been done. It's load and go.
And I would say that that's the big difference between the ambulance exchange point and any particular other like MCI, whether it's an auto accident, is during an auto accident, I don't have a potential threat unless there's unless you're on a highway in a vehicle, but that's a different story. But it's semi-secure. It's the warm zone. You're still operating on that cold, warm zone perimeter where there's still a potential threat. So I want to be in and out as quickly as possible. Again, not only for the for the patients, but for our own safety. I want to be in and out as quickly as possible.
And so I'm gonna reflect this back. So Casualty Collection Point is a secured location in the warm zone where we assemble the casualties to do triage and stabilizing treatment until we can evacuate them to an ambulance to get them to a hospital. The ambulance exchange point is a secured location where we're going to bring those patients from the casualty collection point to the ambulance and do the handoff. It's a transfer point, but it has security around it, often just secured by a contact team, so that the ambulances can safely come in and then egress out. So those are our two things. Now, you hit a moment ago, Leanna, on the $23 million issue, which is, okay, you've come into the casualty collection point as a rescue task force, and you've got 8 reds and 4 yellows. A great start triage has really helped you. You got 8 reds. Which one's going first? Does that matter?
Yes.
Why?
It matters in the sense of the level of their injury, and maybe I'm a red and you're a red, but I'm a little bit better off as a red than you are. So if I'm running the show, then I'm putting you in the ambulance first. That's essentially it. But that is up to the medical professional that's standing there to say, yes, you first.
Yeah, I think
that can be a tough call. It can be a tough call. It's
Bill mentioned that you do your start triage or whatever method you're using to do your first initial triage to determine their red, yellow, green. Well, now you're starting to do a little bit of the secondary triage, and I'm getting a little bit deeper into, I'm removing some clothing. I may be able to put a tourniquet on and make that red, at least slow down the process or the injuries for that one red, so I can take this other red patient. So, what are the interventions I can do that I could save a life right here? Or what interventions I can't do, and I need to get them to the hospital very quickly.
And then I think the other factor, when you just said it, is what hospital? Are we both going to be going, or both your reds, are they going to the same hospital? Are they going to different hospitals? Is one further than the other? What is the definitive care? What is the definitive care?
And I think the way to kind of talk this through, and it's interesting not only having this conversation with EMTs and paramedics, but quite frankly with law enforcement officers that have probably first responder level medical training, but not EMT or paramedic. It's important to get everybody transported as quickly as possible. But if you want to save lives, if you want to save the maximum number of lives, it's really important to get the most severely injured transported first. And when I say that, because it sounds like, well, okay, that's simple. It's not, because now you've got to use medical judgment, because all the triage systems, which nowadays is the only thing that gets taught in EMT and paramedic school, is just these shortcut triage systems. We've got a huge gap in terms of paramedics and especially EMTs using medical judgment to say, okay, this red needs to go in front of this red. And this red is a red, but probably is going to be the last red I'm going to send. And this red, this red's way worse than that first one. I need to get them up in line to go. But it's not just the reds. And here's where it gets super complicated. Your medic in the back of the ambulance during transport is really only going to be able to take care of one patient, which means you now have to, but you don't want to send the ambulance with just one patient. If you can put somebody else on the bench seat, and if you got walking wounded that you can put up in the front seat with whoever's driving to kind of talk to them and make sure they don't pass out, you don't want to send that ambulance away with one if you can send 3.
Correct.
But you've got to match the load. You've got to match the severity so that you don't overload the medic in the back. Easy to do?
Not at all.
Why?
Well, a couple of things, because typically if you have, whatever your EMS system is, if one medic, 2 medics on an ambulance, if you have 2 medics on an ambulance, you're way ahead of the game. Most of the country, I believe, has just 1 medic. But 1 medic in the back taking care of 1 red patient, that's really all they can handle. So I need more hands. I need more people, and it could be EMTs, it could be paramedics, but to carry more than one person, I need people. And how do I get those people?
And even if we do have protocols in place that tell us what we are allowed to take in our ambulance, that doesn't mean anything.
Correct.
Depending on the severity.
Correct.
The severity of, and where they're being transported to. And when we're talking about an active shooter, whoever is running transport is taking into account what hospitals can handle what level of trauma and how many of them. And there's so much that goes into that. We have to remember that we're not the only thing going on in the community. There's other situations that are impacting those hospitals. And in some cases too, the other thing that we know can happen is that there could have been people that ran from the scene or were taken from the scene directly to a hospital that we have no idea what kind of impact that's been. So again, going back to whoever's running transport, that's a heavy job.
And I think the communication has to come in early from either through transport up to staging. But if ambulances are coming in staging and I have extra engine companies or other people, the engine company, if I'm fortunate enough, in my jurisdiction, I'm fortunate enough to have medics on engine companies, I can front load those ambulances coming out of staging. So when I arrive, I've got extra hands, extra medics, and then now I can take 2 reds. If you can take 2 reds in the back of an ambulance, you're hitting the mark.
It's no different. It's no different than you get rolling to a heart attack. It's cardiac arrest. You're doing CPR. That's not going to be one medic in the back by themselves. You're pulling extra. You're pulling extra people either from another ambulance or very often from the engine company. From the fire apparatus, and you've got 3, sometimes 4 people in the back of the ambulance working on that one patient. It's easy to do when it's only that one patient, that one incident. When it turns into a mass casualty incident, now you're down to, well, what is the resource staffing that's available for me in my community? And now it gets dicey because it's a community by community decision. And Sheriff, you and I were together a few weeks ago when I was going through the some MCI training we were doing, and we were kind of testing out the new ones with the cards. And Joe and I were talking, and we had 8 reds, and my job was to figure out which red was going to go first. Now, mind you, we have been teaching for years the idea that you want 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 green to go in every ambulance. And theoretically, or I should say philosophically, that's on target, because what we're actually trying to say is you don't want to overload the one medic that's going to be in the back. You want to make sure it's manageable. But I don't know if you remember the discussion. So Joe and I were kind of debating about, I had 3, and we were debating about which one needed to go first. I'm looking at the 3 reds, and the number 2 and the number 3 red, I'm looking at them going, wait a minute. This red needs a lot of attention during transport. But this red here needs a surgeon. And there's not really anything I'm going to be able to do for this red at all other than give him oxygen. That's it. And I looked up at Joe and I went, as a medic working in the back of the rig, I'd be comfortable with these 2 reds because this guy just needs oxygen and this guy needs my undivided, you remember that? Undivided attention. And it led to that, oh boy moment of this is a lot more complicated than just 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 green.
And it's important that it's that outside the box thinking. It's not everything that we do in anything first response, police, fire, EMS is black and white. There's always an audible that can be called, and because of certain circumstances, just as that.
Well, one of those audibles out there when we're talking about CCPs is where are you going to set up a CCP? Normally the cop from the contact team doesn't have to worry about it. It's where the suspect's already done his carnage. That's your CCP. So that you're triaging it that way. Go ahead, Chief.
Just go ahead. We'll come back to it.
Well, we talk about that. That's an important point. Is there's an element of triage to be done by the law enforcement teams, even though they may not have the medical. And And the idea is once they get that casualty collection point, so you can't really do a whole lot till you get security established. So you get the security over the casualty collection point. The next thing to do is divide the room. You need the uninjured out of the way up against one wall. You need the injured that are walking wounded up out of the way against another wall. And then the ones that are left that are wounded that didn't get up and move or can't get up and move, those are your reds. So the injured that are walking and up against the wall that moved on command, and it sounds really simple, but what we're doing when we say, if you can hear my voice and you're able to, again, if you're injured, you can hear my voice, you're able to get up and move over to this wall. Well, if they get up and move, it means, number one, that their injury is not so severe that they can't move. And that means hemodynamically at the moment that they're stable. And they were able to understand and follow command, which means mentally the brain is still functioning and they're not in shock, at least not yet. You could still have some walking wounded that are actually quite serious. We use that example. You could be shot in the chest and be walking wounded for a little bit.
Correct.
It'll turn into a problem later. But that's how well do you think your average law enforcement officers understand that piece of kind of dividing and conquering when they set up a casualty collection point?
I think they're getting better at it because of all the emphasis on training on active shooter, because there's a lot of active shooter training going on. But at the same time, the old days, and I'm old enough to say that, in the old days, we used to tell them, well, that's the fire department, that's EMT, paramedic's job. I'm not going to touch them. Folks, the day of the contact team and an active shooter, once it's secure and there is a level of security, you, the law enforcement officer, better start touching the patients because you are going to be initially trying to save their lives, putting a tourniquet on them, direct pressure, things like that. That's somebody else's job. No, it's not. It's yours.
And that bleeds over a little bit into the fire service too, is between the paramedic and EMT. It's like, oh, I'm just an EMT. I can't assist a trauma patient. Well, absolutely you can. Your EMT training has taught you that.
I'm sorry. When did a traumatic assessment become an ALS skill? I don't remember assessment being an ALS skill for trauma patients.
No. Triage is everybody's job.
Yeah.
And what I think about too, and when we're running scenario, is like we use the bleeding model. So the bleeding model is like your first tool to look at it. And if you've gone through a really good treatment, triage, and then you've got them into the casualty collection point, maybe you've moved them over to the ambulance exchange point, but you can't quite load them yet. And you watch them continue to bleed before they are put in. So they essentially could technically move from being a red tag to a black tag while you're standing there with them and you haven't even acknowledged it.
Well, and this, we know how Bill likes helicopters. That's how we met even further in our careers. But the bottom line is, take it one step further. The worst patient, the one that needs the attention the most, if you've got helicopter assets, use them. Triage them into that.
Yeah, if you can. I mean, that's
right.
It's kind of like there's a whole can of worms here. You open one can of worms, and inside are 3 more cans of more worms, and it all has to get managed. And I think that's the part that brings all of this back. Is if this sounds hard, it is, and it's chaotic, and there has to be a structure to manage this. Otherwise, we're lucky if we just chuck bodies into the back of an ambulance. We might get them transported in a good time, but when the autopsies are done, we're probably going to find out that there were people that bled out just because they didn't get to the hospital fast enough.
No.
And that's very, very troubling. So let's talk a little bit about, so we've got a casualty collection point. It's been stood up. The rescue task force gets in. One of the things that we often see is that the ambulance exchange point doesn't get set up until we're ready to move the first patient. And now we're standing by to stand by while a security team, a contact team, tries to go and secure an ambulance exchange point. We lose 5-6 minutes right off the bat. When that RTF comes into the room, before they ever get started, is that the best time to start talking to the contact team that's with you about where you want to do your ambulance exchange point?
I'd even take that one step further. Those conversations could be being had at either tactical triage, transport, or staging prior to that. If I'm listening to the initial contact team and I know that the shooting has happened in room 101, well, chances are my casualty collection point is going to be right around that area. So if I'm in staging or if I'm in transport, I'm already looking at a map. Where's room 101 and where is my best ingress and egress for that? So when the RTF does get down there and says, hey, we're ready for we already know where we're going. So again, I think those conversations can be had during the incident. We're being very proactive on that.
And I think a lot of times what we see is there is a big delay in the AEP getting established. And keeping in mind, we could have more than one. We could have more than one CCP depending on the location of victims, right? But it's always late to get established, and I agree with you. It should be a point of discussion and staging. Not that they can set it up, but that they can start looking to see where it might be, especially if they're the ambulances that are sitting there and staging. It should also be a really early discussion with transport. And a lot of times we have to cue that. We have to cue to get that discussion going about where the AEP is going to go. But we know, too, that when they leave staging, depending on who's there watching and mentoring staging, the ambulances aren't going to be able to leave unless they've been told. They've got to have the location to where they're going, or they're never going to come out of it.
Well, folks, and this is exactly why we have tactical triage and transport, the three-headed dog, right there in one location. They need to be talking. The contact teams can even add their input and a possibility of having an AEP. And that way tactical goes, we're a little light on people. We need more cops. Now you're starting to work staging to come in so we get more security in play.
Well, and I think something we have to be cognizant of, though, is to do it from staging. We might have an idea of what everything looks like.
It's not going to be ideal.
But we don't know where everybody's parked forward.
Yeah,
correct.
We might think this is the greatest location ever for an AEP, but you get there and you find that your squad is blocking the road and there's 4 law enforcement vehicles that have just, abandoned their vehicle right in place, so you don't know if you can get there.
I was going to come back to that and say, yes, it has to be talked about in staging. It can be talked about in staging, but it has to be confirmed by the RTF that is the exact location.
Absolutely.
Or the RTF's the one to be established in that.
And I'll tell you the other thing that I think is important to remember is it's natural human tendency that the way you came in is the way you think about going out. And for me, the very first thing that I want to do when I hit the casualty collection point, before I go to work, before I even start looking at patients, is and maybe even before I go through the door, but I'm looking around doing a quick scan for exit signs, because the door that I came in is probably not the closest door to pavement. And I want to physically carry people as short of distance as possible. And sometimes your casualty collection point might have an exit door right off of it that opens right up into a parking lot. You see that in schools a lot. And if not, you look out in the hallway and you go, okay, where's my exit points? And then you turn to your law enforcement security and you go, hey, I want to use that door. Right outside that door, there's pavement. I want to use that as our ambulance exchange point. Can you see if you can make that happen? And now I'm done. I go to work on my patients. Meanwhile, law enforcement coordinating with tactical is figuring out, can we make that happen? Is that a safe-ish area? And get a contact team in to secure it.
I was going to say, kind of going back from what our conversation, we're talking about the communication and from the RTF getting how many ambulances or whatever. A lot of times we hear a lot of times in the classes the ambulances are delayed slightly. It's not because they're not thinking about it. The RTFs think about, hey, I need 3 ambulances. It's who's communicating that back to transport to send them to the AEP. It's because they're the stressful environment. They're taking care of their patients. They're deep in their tunnel vision and they're taking care of the patients what they should be. But who's calling for those ambulances to actually come to the scene?
Yeah, and honestly, as soon as the ambulance exchange point is secured, we want that contact team that's securing the AEP to report that to tactical, which then allows tactical to turn to transport, who's standing right there with them, and go, hey, the AEP of this location is secured if you want to get your first ambulance up. Now, we don't want to put 3 or 4 ambulances there, but getting the first one up, and that way when the RTF calls triage and says, hey, I'm ready,
They're there.
we got an ambulance waiting on you at the AEP. Yeah. This has been a really, really great discussion. As we close out, any final thoughts on clarity that you can bring to people about Casualty Collection Point and Ambulance Exchange Point?
The only thing I'll say on the ambulance exchange point, this is so hard for first responders to do, and EMTs and paramedics, is when you get to that ambulance exchange point, you want to be in and out as quickly as possible. And a lot of times the driver of that ambulance wants to get out and help manage that patient, but that driver needs to stay in if they can and let the patients get loaded so that they're ready to go. Hey, doors on the back close. This is the hospital you're going to, and go.
And ready to go, knowing that they're probably going to turn around and have to come back. You know, and emphasizing that part of it. And of course, the other part of the AEP, like you just said, and we talked about earlier, it's not a place where you do it all over again. You don't go through all the assessment all over again. It's time to load, go. You've already done the work.
Yes.
And let's get them to the hospital.
Cops on the contact team, take care of the threat. Take care of the threat. But if you're assigned to an RTF, then you take care of your firemen.
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely on that one. We worked really hard to get the model up that works now across the country. And I'm not, for putting firefighters into a warm zone. And it is completely dependent on the law enforcement element staying with them from start to finish.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Another great discussion. For those of you that are listening, thank you for taking the time to join us. If there's any questions you have or anything we can do to assist you in implementing active shooter incident management, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We are happy to help. Thank you to our producer, Carla Torres. And until next time, stay safe.